Welcome to the 12th and final office hours for COIS FRSC 2750, Computer Crime and Forensics. This is the wrap-up. We'll do a little bit of admin stuff, and then I'll get into talking to you about the final exam, which I think is why people are here for the most part. But let's start with what's due tonight. Remember that this is the last day of the term. Although every other week we've had things due on Friday, it is due tonight at 11:59:00. So what we've got due here in week 13 is chapter 10, the quiz, and discussion 5, post 2. So they're both due at 11:59:00 tonight. So please get those in if you haven't already. I just don't want any confusion. It's strange, but we have a holiday tomorrow, so the school term's actually over tonight. So please get those in, and we'll get them marked for you. Speaking of marking, we are industriously working away on marking your term papers. I am going to this evening at some point, it may be quite late tonight, I am going to release the marks for some of the specific term papers that we finished marking. I would ask a favor of you, and that is, once you review the feedback, if you have questions, hold off on those questions until early next week. And the reason I say that is you're not going to get a response quickly. The markers are still marking, the workshop leaders are still marking industrially all of these term papers, and they want to get through that, and I think it's fair. They want all the term papers to be marked before they turn around and start looking at marks again, okay? So please do review the feedback, and if you have questions or concerns, just hold off until early next week, and that way when you ask those questions, you will be the top of their inbox and they will get back to you, okay? I think that there's probably about 3 of the 8 that are completely marked at this point, and I don't know the numbers right now. I'll have to look and see, and I will release those, like I said, a little later on this evening. I think in general, as is expected, there are some really good papers. There's some really good marks out there, and there are other papers that were thrown together in the last hour or two before they were due or whatever, and the marks reflect that. So yeah, there should be a pretty good corollary or relationship between the amount of effort you put in and the mark that you got. And you know, if you spent weeks on this thing and it was your 7th revision that you sent us, and you get a failing mark on it and you don't understand the comments, by all means, reach out, and I would suggest when you do reach out that you put the course name as always, but put the topic number, and then include myself and all the workshop leaders. All of our emails are available under the getting started, and that way you'll get a response from the correct person that marked your paper, okay? That's the fastest way. Otherwise, you send a question to me, I go back to you and say, what topic? And then you respond to me half a day later, and then I have to figure out who marked that topic, and then I forward it to them half a day later, and it's just slower. So if you give all the information up front and you send it to all of us, the right person will respond to you. Okay, so that's kind of just how things work, right? So that's the most efficient way to get the answers that you may be looking for. However, I can say from some of the papers that I've looked at, there are some really well-written papers there. There are perfect marks. We don't have any problem with giving someone a perfect mark if the paper deserves it, okay? So that's kind of what's going on. It'll probably be the discussion 5 won't be a huge priority for us, quite frankly. It'll be done before you write your exam for sure. You'll have all your marks in before the exam, but we'll be churning through the term papers, which take a lot longer to mark, and are a bigger percentage of the mark. Remember, when you look at your grade in Blackboard, that is the number of marks. Like, don't look at that denominator if you haven't handed everything in, because the denominator may not be accurate. So I mean the number at the bottom of the fraction. So the numerator is the number of marks you've got towards out of 100 for the term. Okay. If you handed in 5 discussions, if you did all discussions, your marks can be slightly overstated, because it's best 4 of 5 for the discussions. So you would have to deduct your lowest mark from the number of marks that you've accumulated. Blackboard's simply not smart enough. We can't program it to do a best 4 out of 5 calculation. So that's something I do manually when I compile your marks. Okay. Speaking of marks, once the exam is completed, and we'll talk in depth about that in a second. Once the exam is completed, I have 10 days to get them all marked and submitted to the administration. I am not permitted, and no professor is permitted, to release the exam marks directly to you. So I can't do that. I won't be releasing your final marks in Blackboard or anything like that. That's not how Trent determines that we work. So we are required to have all the exams marked within 10 days of the day that you write, and then submit to the administration. They do whatever the administration does. I have no idea what that is, but they then release them to you. Okay, so that's the process. So sending me an email and asking me when you can see your mark, I won't have an answer for you. I will have submitted them as fast as I can, because I don't like to sit on them. And then it's usually 2 to 3 days afterwards, within 2 to 3 days, sometimes it's the same day, that I submit them to the administration, that they are released to you. It's probably worth saying, if you're not happy with your mark, there is a process that you can go through to to file that complaint, or to look for a remark on the exam, etc. What I will not be doing, and I've said this the entire time, if you got a 59 and you needed a 60, that is not my problem. I will not be arbitrarily changing marks. If there's a reason to change marks, I will absolutely do that. But if you're just not happy with your mark because you fell short of whatever, I don't change marks. So I will be submitting the marks as is. I don't bell curve. I don't do anything like that. They go in the way they're earned. Okay. There is a full process. If you think that your exam mark is not correct and you need it remarked, then that's fine. There is a whole process to follow. I don't really know what that is. It doesn't really involve me. If I'm the person that marked it, I don't mark it again. If it's one of my workshop leaders that marked it, then I would be the first person to look at it for a remark. I have not seen any situation so far in the 9 years where I've seen any substantial change in the mark on a remark. That's not to say that we couldn't make a mistake, right? If you're doing really well in the course and you feel like the exam went really well and your mark doesn't reflect that, we can make a mistake. And we can make a mistake, and you can make a mistake in that if you're writing in person and you're submitting a Scantron and you don't put your proper student number on there, you might not get any marks for the Scantron portion, right? For the multiple choice portion. So things like that can happen. I slice and dice and look at all the marks as I go through in the hopes that that does not happen. But, I'm not saying that we're perfect, because we're not, but it's rare that, that a remark, just a pure remark of an exam, gets you much of a different result from what it was originally marked at. So again, you get to make your own decisions and determine what you want to do. I'm just telling you what my experience is so far in the first 9 years. So, so I think I've covered what's due today. I've talked very generalities about the exam. I want to get into specifics about the exam here. Bear with me for 1 second. Just going back. So I see from my Trent that the COIS FRSC 2750 exam is on Thursday, April 20th at 7 p.m. So there are 3 possible places that you could be writing that. You could have chosen to write in Peterborough. You could have chosen to write in Durham. Those are just standard in-person exams, or you could have chosen to write online. So if you chose to write online, we use a service called Examity. There would have been a further need for you to book an exam date and time with Examity, set up an Examity account, book a date and time, and you should know exactly when you're writing that exam. It'll be within 24 hours of the time that everyone else is writing, but it could be at 3 in the morning or whatever you've determined. Trent Online are the people that deal directly with Examity. I do not have any connection directly with Examity, so asking me Examity related questions won't do you any good. What you should do if you have a question or concern about your Examity exam, and I'm not talking results, I'm talking about schedules and issues and getting logged on, those sorts of things. It's online at trentu.ca. Feel free to CC me on the email so that I know what's going on. If for some reason we have a problem at our end, we will, don't worry, don't stress out. We will make it up to you, whether that's rescheduling the exam or whatever. These things do periodically happen. Once in a while, the proctor doesn't show up, and that's fine. We will definitely deal with that for you. If, on the other hand, you show up 2 hours late for your exam, maybe you thought that it was a different time in your local time, wherever you are, or you forgot, or you slept in, or you decided that pizza was more appetizing than writing your exam. All those things are your problem, and you will not be offered an opportunity to write the exam. Just like if you have booked to write in Peterborough or booked to write in Durham and you show up more than an hour late, you will not be allowed into that exam room. It will be a 0 on the exam. Of course, if you had a medical reason and a doctor's note and things like that, we obviously accommodate those sorts of things. But you're going to want to have a provable medical type emergency to not be writing the exam at the time you're scheduled. If you're on a cruise ship with your parents and the internet goes out, that is not our problem. So if you're writing online, you need to have a good internet. I would suggest a backup internet plan. You need to have a good computer or computing device. You need a webcam and a microphone. So not having a webcam or a microphone means that you can't write with Examity. Those are requirements. You'll not be permitted to start the exam without a webcam and a microphone working. So hopefully that's all been explained to you already. There is also the practice for using Examity that's available in Blackboard. I feel like it's called Examity, but let me check. It is called Examity. It's in the menu on the left-hand side, and it takes you into a welcome to Examity, a remote proctoring practice so that you get familiar with it, and an Examity tutorial video. So if you're writing in Examity, particularly if this is the first time you're using it, my strong advice is not to wait till the day of the exam to figure out how Examity works. Get comfortable with it. You're going to have a lot on your plate already with writing an exam. So get comfortable with it, get familiar so that it's second nature to you, and that you're able to do it effectively without causing yourself any additional stress. Okay. Keep in mind that, let's say you have an 8 o'clock appointment for Examity. You show up, the proctor shows up, the proctor's asking you some questions. There's a process to go through. Your exam hasn't started. The time is not started until you're actually logged into your exam and the exam opens. Okay. So don't worry about that. Don't get stressed out about that. If the proctor's asking you questions and they do have their process to follow, it's not until you log in that clock starts for you. Okay. In terms of if you're on your My Trent and you're looking in the top right corner, it will say location 1 is the gym, location 2 is DRA, so that's your Durham room 115. So that's the room in Durham. I'll be proctoring in Durham. Dr. Hurley will be proctoring at the gym in Peterborough for our exam. He's the head of COIS, for those that don't know. The display in the top right corner in My Trent is not dynamic. It does not change depending on what your choices are. I have someone asking me a direct question and saying, I just checked the location for my exam. I'm seeing 2 locations for my exam. One is gym, one is DRA 115. Will I know the right location later? Just confused. And I see that person has said that they understand from what I just said. There is a place apparently and I don't have this because I'm not a student writing exams. If you go into your My Trent under academics, under exams, I believe, there's a place that tells you where you've elected. There's an online course location button there that you can click on that'll tell you where you've elected to write. If you did not make a choice, you had a 2-week period about 4 weeks ago. If you did not make a choice as to where you were going to write, you've been assigned Peterborough as your location. If that presents a problem for you, meaning you live in Italy and you're not going to be in Peterborough, for instance, I would reach out with a huge apology and, ask online at trentu.ca if at this late date, and despite the fact that you did not do what you were asked to do, they can schedule you for online. As far as, if you don't make that, there's always, and I guarantee this will happen again this year because it happens every year. There's someone that'll send me an email on the day of the exam and they'll say, I don't know the password to get into the online exam. And I'll say to them, once I've dealt with whatever else is going on with people that are actually writing the exam where they're scheduled to write, I'll say, did you schedule it with Examity? And they'll go, no. I'll say, you missed your exam. Okay, so don't be that person. I'm not guaranteeing that online at Trent is going to accommodate you at this point in time, but I would be trying right about now if I had not done what I was asked to do. And keep in mind, it's 100% on you for not doing that. So I wouldn't. I would be very grateful if I was a student that was asking for them to do extra work for me, and that's how I would approach it. It's kind of like you get pulled over for speeding in the car. Getting mad at the policeman when you knew you were speeding is the wrong way to go. Okay, just life lessons. It never goes better for you by getting mad at the cop. Okay, so I think I've set up all the things in terms of getting ready to write the exam itself. And I think the last thing, and probably the thing that most people are most interested in, is what the exam looks like. So bear with me while I pull that up so that I've got it right in front of me. So I should say a couple of things here. If you are an SAS student and you are writing online, you will get your accommodation. You don't have to verify with me. In fact, please don't. There are lots of accommodated people. As I got all the email from SAS outlining accommodations, I've entered you into the correct group so that you get your multiplier as is appropriate. And before the exam, I will go through every single person and cross-check and make sure I've got it right. That's not to say I can't make a mistake, but let's say that I do not give you enough time to write your exam, and I'm not in correspondence with your proper SAS accommodation. Do what you can, and then you and I will sort it out afterwards. This has never happened to me, but if that was the case, don't rely on me to change it on the fly, because if you're writing at 7 o'clock like everyone else, I'm dealing with a bunch of people in front of me. I'm answering questions for my proctor in Peterborough, and I'm doing the best I can to make sure everything's going well with Examity. So do reach out to me for sure, and if I can help you, I will. The other thing is the online people at Trent are available from 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. They're not available at 2 in the morning or whatever. So if you run into an Examity related problem, what I would be doing is I would be documenting it. I would be doing screenshots. Send me an email, copy me on the email, send them an email. We will sort it out. Do not get stressed. If the issue is not at your end, if it's at our end, we will fix it for you. And if that means setting up an additional date for you to write the exam, that's what we'll do. Okay. So don't stress out about that. The service wasn't as good like it's getting better. Our first year of using Examity was not great, in my opinion. We had a lot of proctors not show up for students, and students were going out of their minds, as you can imagine, sitting there waiting, thinking that they were losing their time on their exam. Don't get stressed that way. If Examity's not doing their part, if you're properly logged in and you're waiting, document it, send me an email as a copy, and send Trent online at trentu.ca an email, and we'll try and resolve it on the spot, or we'll make it right afterwards. Okay. The exam itself is a 3-hour exam. It's marked out of 180 marks. It has a multiple choice and multiple answer section that is 100 marks long. So it's 100 questions. So if you're writing in person, you'll have one of those Scantron forms that has 100 question capacity. And Scantron, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about one of those forms where you fill in the little A, B, C, D, or E. You shade in the answer that's right for each question. So if you're writing in person, you want to bring a few pencils and an eraser for that part. You can write in pen for the short answers and such, but you definitely want to be able to erase your answer if you make a mistake, right? So so that's part one. Part two is like a short answer question, is short answer questions. You are allowed to use point form. I actually encourage you to use point form. It makes it easier to mark, clearer to mark. And then part three is a scenario where it's a series of shorter questions based on a given scenario. So we'll set a scenario and you'll have various questions to answer about that scenario. Okay, so we've got 100 marks of multiple choice, multiple answer, and 80 marks of short answers. Okay, so it's not a coincidence that the exam has 180 marks and 180 minutes, so that should help you set your pace. You are allowed and encouraged to bring a cheat sheet. That cheat sheet is your standard 8.5 by 11 inch sheet. Your standard. I don't know what the form is, but your very standard letter paper. And you can have that printed. You can write on it. It can be two-sided. I'm happy for you to print it in as small a font as you can possibly see. But you can have that with you. So you have one handwritten or printed, two-sided 8.5 by 11 cheat sheet that you have prepared yourself. Okay, and you're allowed to take that into the exam and use it as you see fit. Okay. Other than that, though, it's a closed book. You're not going to have access to any websites or your text or anything like that. Okay. I'm just scrolling down here. When a question's worth 5 marks, unless it specifies list 3 or explain 3 or explain 4 or explain 7, whatever, the expectation is that you make 5 points. Okay, so if it's a short answer question worth 5 marks, the expectation is that you have 5 valid points. If you do the shotgun approach, that's great. We'll mark the first 5 points that you have. Okay, we're not going to go through and pick out your good answers and discard your bad answers. So avoid the shotgun approach would be my advice. I think that's everything that off the top of my head or off my plan that I wanted to cover with you guys. Does anyone have any further questions for me? Is there something else that I can help you out with? Okay, so you've got 2 weeks to the exam. Sometimes I get asked how one should prepare and that sort of thing. I guess the other thing that I wanted to say is that the final exam traditionally is harder than the midterm. So people get sometimes a false sense of confidence when they had an open book midterm and you've had open book quizzes and you've had that sort of thing. I would suggest really preparing well for this, and by preparing well I mean reading through the book again, covering each and every chapter. I would probably be reading a chapter a day. If I was on my absolute best A game and I had the kind of time, I would do a chapter a day between now and the 20th when you write the exam. And I would be, as I'm reading that, I would be making my little cheat sheet out and getting ready for that. So to answer your question, Lori, the cheat sheet can be handwritten or it can be printed. You're welcome to do whatever you want. Whatever works for you. There will be multiple choice questions where multiple answers are right. Yes. So I refer to that as multiple answer. So it's a multiple choice and multiple answer, those 100. Now, here's the thing. You guys have been doing quizzes all along. All of the questions, 100% of those questions are from the same pool as the questions that you've seen from the quizzes. So you're going to recognize word for word sometimes many of those questions. Okay, so that's another way that you can prepare, is by looking at your quizzes. Hopefully you've taken screenshots and prepared that way. I don't reopen the quizzes, and I did mention that early on. My advice for those that want it is not to try and memorize quiz answers, because if you don't get the same questions, it's not going to help you. Instead, understand the concepts by reading the chapters again. You don't forget, you've got no one's expecting you to memorize, let's say, the hexadecimal location of a piece of evidence, right? Or the file location of a piece of evidence. No one's expecting that. That's why you have the cheat sheet. So put those kinds of things down as you're going through, things that will come in handy. Okay. Will this be weighted more to the second half of the course? Yes, it'll be a little bit more weighted. Certainly the questions will be more weighted towards the written short answer questions will be weighted more towards the second half of the course. The multiple choice will be somewhat weighted, but not as heavily weighted. In other words, you're responsible for everything, but because I've already assessed you on the first half of the course, I'm not going to be as heavy on that first half of the course. Okay. Does the cheat sheet have to be in your own words, or can you copy info? You can put anything you want on that cheat sheet. I'm not going to ever see it. You don't have to hand it in to me. If you want to copy word for word and paste a page from the book into that cheat sheet, Bob's your uncle. Go ahead, make yourself happy. That would be a bad thing to do, but no, if you're worried about plagiarism or some concern like that, I'm not marking it. No one's expecting you to do that. When you're doing your short answers, no one's expecting you to cite sources either. Okay, so this is an exam. It's essentially a closed book exam. So if you've got a great memory, or you've written word for word in your cheat sheet, and you put word for word from the text in your answer, I'm going to be fine with that. It's not going to be a problem. Okay. Will the short answers be similar to the midterm questions format or different? The short answer are going to be similar to the midterm. What we didn't do in the midterm is such a scenario. I'm just going to grab the midterm just to make sure. Bear with me for 1 second. Just taking a look at the midterm. Yeah, so on the midterm we did multiple choice. We did 60 multiple choice, and we did 6 5-mark short answers. So the short answers are going to be very similar. The multiple choice and multiple answer are going to be similar, except that there's going to be more of them. The midterm was a 2-hour affair, and this is a 3-hour final. Okay. And a piece of advice, and I may have started to say this and not completed my thought. People do get overconfident because they've done well on the midterm. That always happens. My typical experience is, on average, people do about 15% worse on the midterm than they do, or on the final, than they do on the midterm. And that's basically purely a result of it being closed book versus open book. So, and I think there's a compounding factor where people got a really good mark at the midterm, and then they don't take the final as seriously as they should. This is a very informationally dense course. It's very different than anything else that you'll find in Trent University. So you're going to have to, if you want to do really, really well, you're going to have to go through the text, and you're going to have to review each and every chapter, and not just casually read it with the TV on, but actually study it and make sure you understand the core concepts. Now, my advice to that is, if you look in your course content, and we look in the individual chapters, so I'm just going into chapter 3, for instance, I put learning outcomes there. So, and they're from the text, right? So acquisition of evidence, exploring evidence, understanding the forensic examination environment, tool validation, creating sterile media, and defining forensic imaging. So after I had studied chapter 3, I'd want to make sure that I knew all of those concepts. And if I didn't, and again, I'm talking A game here, and I do understand you've got multiple courses, and you're not going to spend 80 hours preparing for this exam. But if I had all the time in the world and I wanted to get as good a mark as I could in this particular course, I would study that chapter, and I would go back to those learning outcomes and make sure I was confident of them. And of course, I would be copying things that I wouldn't want to memorize onto my cheat sheet. Okay. And I would do that electronically. There's no way I'd try and write out a cheat sheet. I would definitely do it electronically so that I could format it and reformat it, and I wouldn't have to rewrite the cheat sheet. You got both sides of an 8.5 by 11. Make your margins as small as possible. Make your font as small as you can read comfortably, and go from there. Okay. I'm just looking through the questions, making sure that I've hopefully answered everyone's question. I think I've covered everything so far. If anyone has other questions, feel free to either send them in the chat, either publicly or privately, or just talk to me over audio here, and I'll be happy to deal with whatever question you may have. Like I said, we'll be getting your marks to you. You'll have all of your marks before you write your exam for sure. We'll be going as fast as we reasonably can to get everything marked. But just like you guys have lots of assignments to do right towards the end of school, it's kind of bunched up here. We also have a lot of stuff to mark in this course and other courses. So, is there a certain amount of marks that are coming from the scenario portion apart from the short answer portion? Yes. Let me go back to the scenario portion of the final here. So the scenario portion is 30 marks. The short answer portion is 50 marks. So the scenario, just to be as clear as I'm going to be with this, I'll propose a scenario. and there'll be certain steps in that investigation or related to that scenario that I'll ask you, how would you do this? How would you do that? What does this mean? Or those sorts of things. So I'm trying to give you a true to life situation where you can respond and, be a forensic examiner. That's what the scenario is about. Okay. All right, guys, if I've answered all your questions, feel free to get on with your evening. Thank you very much for coming out to the office hours. Thank you very much for the course. I hope that my goal is always for people's marks to reflect the effort they put into the course. So hopefully if you've worked hard in the course, that you've seen the kind of results that you expect and that you want. I am certainly not the kind of person that's going to adjust any marks at the end. So once I've submitted the marks to the administration, even before that, I don't adjust marks. I don't bell curve marks. I don't adjust marks. They are what they are, and I'm happy always to consider that I've made a mistake. But in general, if you got a 59 and you wanted a 60, or you got a 75 and you wanted an 80, I would suggest that it's too late at this point. Okay. So thank you, guys. Thanks very much. Good night. I will post this in the next hour or so, and you can refer back to this office hours. Good luck on the final. I'll see some of you guys in Durham on the 20th. Thank you.